So are you tired of your lawn being the worst one on the block and you're ready to change that and become the talk of the block for a good reason? Well, stick around in this video. We're gonna talk about how to do a full renovation, which is what I did to my OG test plot. That was the original bag of Mountain View seed, top choice tall fescue that I planted is now gone. So I'm gonna show you how I did it, what I used, and also the new grass that I actually put in place of that tall fescue. So let's get into this video. All right, so before we actually jump into talking about the process, let's talk about why you should do a full renovation. So if you're looking at your lawn and you have a lot of weeds, I'd say anywhere from 60 to maybe 70% or more weeds, you probably should do a full renovation just to start with a clean slate. And that's one of the benefits of doing a full renovation is you get to start with that clean slate. And when you do that, you can now choose the grass seed and the cultivars that you want to have in your lawn. So you can go with some of the Mountain View seed, which I definitely recommend, or you can go with the elevated lawnscapes mix, which is based on all Mountain View seed cultivars. A full renovation is not always necessary. In a lot of situations, homeowners can just do an overseed and see some drastic improvements. And then after overseeding year after year, you can also start to see some of those benefits, especially if you've got a fairly thin lawn. But going in with a full renovation allows you to now be in control of your lawn.
Hey, you lit.
All right, now let's jump into the process. So as we start talking about the actual process of doing the full renovation, step number one is going to be you gotta eliminate your existing lawn. It's gotta go, it's time to get it out of there. So if you're dealing with a cool season lawn, this is pretty easy. You can just grab you some holy water, which is what we like to call it, also known as non-selective herbicide, because we're looking to eliminate everything that's there, all of your vegetation. This is gonna take multiple applications. Typically, you're gonna want to do 2, maybe 3 applications, at a minimum 2. And normally you'll go about 10 to 14 days in between those applications, making sure that you are watering in between those to make sure anything that is in the ground like weed seeds go ahead and germinate and come up, and you can eliminate those also in your next round of application. The next step in this process is going to be the ground prep. This is probably going to be the most difficult portion of this process, and probably where you're going to spend the most time and also effort. So now that we've got that existing lawn killed off, we now need to remove it. So you can do that in a couple of ways. You can take your mower with your bagger on it, scalp it down as low as you can get it. You're gonna want to remove the majority of that existing lawn. You don't have to get every single grass blade out of it, but you wanna make sure that you can get the seed down to the soil. You don't want a lot of matted down dead grass from your previous lawn still on the surface. You want that seed to be able to get contact with the soil. Once you've removed that previous lawn, now you need to start working the ground. If you need to do any leveling, any grading, any of that kind of work, now is the time to do it. So once you get your grass there, especially with a cool season lawn, it becomes a lot more difficult to do grading and leveling type work to get the lawn to where you want it. So spend the time now up front before you get your grass planted. So in renovating the OG test plot, you can see I worked this almost back to completely bare ground. The reason for that is I had to do some grading type work. It's hard to see in the video footage, but there were some ruts and hills and valleys that I needed to work out I didn't have to bring any soil in, but I needed to work that ground and kind of correct some of those uneven places in this area. Another method of doing your ground prep is once you've removed that existing lawn, you can come in with an aerator and do a heavy aeration. That now begins to create that seed bed for that seed to be able to get down to the soil. So that is also another option that you can use, and you can just rent the equipment from your local rental supply company or a big box store. Doesn't cost that much for a couple of hours or maybe even a day. You can rent it, get the job done, take it back and be done. The next part of this process is probably going to be the most critical point in everything that we do, and that's going to be seeding. So this is going to determine the look of your lawn for the remainder of its existence, and hopefully you don't have to do another renovation to correct what you do now. So this is probably where you should spend the most of your money throughout this process. You do not want to skimp out on seed. Quality seed is not that cheap, but it pays for itself in the long run, especially when we're talking about the Mountain View seed cultivars, when they require less water, less herbicides, less fertilization. Those things start to pay dividends along the way to give you some return on the investment that you made up front. Throughout this process, there are other options of fertilizers and some of the tools and equipment that we can use more budget-friendly options and still get some great results. But when it comes to the seed, that is not the same. This is where we want to make sure we're spending our bucks in the right place. So when I'm looking for a quality seed, most of the time I will go to the NTEP and look at the actual test data as these seeds were tested and review those results. You'll find that a lot of the Mountain View seed cultivars perform very well up at the top of the NTEP results. Then we know we're getting a quality seed. With a quality seed, not just specifically to Mountain View seed, but you get higher germination rate and you also get 0 weed seed and 0 other crop. Any seed that I will ever plant into my lawn will have those criteria. 0 weed seed, 0 other crop. I'm planting grass seed, not other weeds. That's what my goal is. So when it comes to seeding with Mountain View seed cultivars on a full renovation, typically I don't like to go over 8 pounds per thousand. I know that seems lower than what the typical recommendation is for tall fescue bare ground renovations, but when you're dealing with a lateral spread type cultivars, they tend to fill in a lot more than your typical tall fescues. And also on the first year, I don't like to have a very dense lawn. I want to make sure there's enough room for those new seedlings to grow, mature, spread, get the nutrients and water without a lot of competition around them. And also when we start to get into the fourth quarter with the hot, humid conditions, we want to make sure we're having proper airflow to try to keep that disease pressure as low as possible on this very young first summer that is going to experience. The goal of a first year renovation is to carry as much year 1 grass into year 2. So the key to having uniform coverage and germination is making sure you're putting the seed in the soil. So one of the methods that I love to use to incorporate the seed into the soil is the garden weasel cultivator. I've used this for a number of years. I will take the time to make sure that I am incorporating that seed into the soil. I know if you have a larger yard, if you're talking 10,000 square feet or larger, I know this may not be feasible to be able to do, but they've got other tools, either a slit seeder, or you could get do aeration or aerator. So those are other options for those larger areas. But if you've got a fairly small to maybe medium sized area, you can't beat using the garden weasel to make sure that you're incorporating that seed into the soil. And guarantee you, you will definitely see a lot more uniform coverage and germination by using this method. Now that we've incorporated the seed into the soil, it's time to make sure that we're turning on the water. We're going to want to make sure that we keep this seed consistently moist, not saturated and soaked, but moist for the next 14 days at a minimum. So at that point, you should have pretty solid germination and you can start backing down off of the water. Not completely, but depending on your weather conditions, you may be able to back down to maybe twice a day watering, and then give it a little more time and then back that down to once a day. But you want to start reducing that water once you normally hit about that 14-day mark. So typically that's about the time I get out to do my first mow, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And you want to start reducing that water amount and getting back to a more normal watering pattern. So I did a full video on the first mow, so I will link that down in the description. But what I will say is let your height of cut determine when you get out to make your first mow. So if you're gonna be cutting at about 2 inches, I would say once you hit about the 2.5, 3 inch mark, it's time to get out there and make that first mow. So go check out the full video. I get into some more details on that, which will be linked in the description on that first mow. But I know it's an exciting time and everybody's gonna be looking forward to getting that in. But there's more and even better mows that are gonna come this fall once this lawn really gets established. Now we've got our first mow in, or maybe we've got a couple of mows in at this point. Now it's time to start talking about fertilization. So there's a couple of ways to do this. It's debated on which one is the right way to do it, but I will give you my process of how I do it. I am a get everything done on the same day. I don't separate all of my operations. I am a one and done type situation when I go in for my seeding. So I will seed, fertilize, any other applications that I need to make on the same day. My fertilizer of choice is typically whatever fertilizer I'm already using throughout the season. I don't pick a starter fertilizer. If the lawn is not deficient in phosphorus, there is no real need for you to apply any phosphorus either at the time of seeding or after. So a starter fertilizer really does not help benefit anything once we get around the 30-day mark. Everything typically levels out to the point of there really wasn't a need for you to apply those additional nutrients to the soil. So if you already have your soil test and you know that you are not deficient in phosphorus, just continue applying your normal fertilizer. No need to change it up and get a starter fertilizer just because you're applying seed. So throughout the fall, I typically aim to apply between 50 and 60% of my total yearly amount of nitrogen. The fall time is when we really feed our cool season lawns. When the springtime comes, we're already gonna have the spring flush. So there's really no need to push a lot of additional top growth. So in the fall is when we feed our lawns. So you can aim to get down anywhere from 50 to 60% of your yearly total amount of nitrogen in the fall, and you'll be just fine. So you can split those up into a couple of applications. If you have any fertilizer blackouts in your area, make sure you're abiding by those laws. And as we get later into the fall and closer to winter, the grass really doesn't utilize those nutrients later in the season. So we want to make sure we're getting those nutrients applied early enough in the fall so that the plant can uptake and utilize those nutrients to make sure you're actually benefiting the plant and it's utilizing the nutrients that you're putting down. Now that we've got our renovation grown in, we're mowing it, we're fertilizing it, the only other thing left is weed control. So with weed control, I typically don't do a lot of fall, winter weed control because a lot of the weeds that do germinate and come up will actually die over the winter. And also, once I have this renovation established, I want to make sure that I'm giving it its best chance to survive without anything inhibiting its growth or establishment. And weed control, even when applied properly, can have some negative effects on the lawn. But if you need to, I say if your weeds are starting to overtake your renovation, you do need to get out there and keep them under control. So I would typically wait around the 5-week mark, depending on what herbicide you're going down with. Or if you've got 3 or 4 mows on it, at that point you should be safe to apply your post-emergent herbicides. You can go with a simple 3-way, or triclopyr is another good one. But keep in mind, if you're doing some touch-up reseeding through this period of time, if you are applying post-emergent herbicides, they will have an impact on that germination of those touch-up seeds that you are applying. So keep those in mind. But I don't do a lot of fall or winter weed control. Typically just wait till the spring, get out there, get me a good cleanup application done, and we're all set for the season. So we have covered the topics for a full renovation. This is what I did. This is my process. You can tweak this process along the way to fit your needs and your situation, but this is a good guideline for you to be able to follow. I have linked some additional videos down in the description that may give you some more of that detailed information that you are looking for. If you don't find it in those videos, just drop me a comment down below and I'll get you the information that you're looking for. So, as I always say, just know we work.